The outboard market has a secret everyone sees, but no one wants to say out loud. Cheaper engines from across the ocean are slipping onto American transoms faster than the big brands expected, and the price gap looks almost too good to be real. Some owners swear they have found a loophole. Others quietly regret a decision they can't take back. The real twist is that the difference isn't where most people think it is. And if you run a boat, any boat, you are already part of this story, whether you know it or not. The price. Question no one wants to spell out. Behind the counter at a lot of American dealerships, the same scene plays out over and over. A boater walks in with a tired engine and a mid-sized hull that still has a lot of life left in it. They want to repower. The service writer prints two numbers. The American four-stroke carries a price that almost equals what the boat itself is worth. The Chinese outboard, through a different channel or a smaller shop, promises the same horsepower for what feels like a bargain that borders on suspicious. On paper, the gap is not small. It is enough money to cover a new trailer, upgraded electronics, or a generous pile of fuel for the coming seasons. For someone who only makes this decision once or twice in their life, that is a powerful pull. They see one path that pushes their budget to the edge, and another that fits with room to spare. What complicates things is that the cheaper engine does not look like a toy. The cowling is modern. The paint is glossy. The brochure talks about four-stroke technology, smooth power, and a horsepower rating that matches the American model line for line. To anyone who is not living inside a service bay, the two options feel almost interchangeable. It is easy to think that people warning against the cheaper choice are just defending their brands, or are stuck in stories from an older era. The idea that you might be able to get away with paying much less for what seems like the same thing is tempting. To understand why that sometimes works and sometimes fails in slow motion, you have to step back and look at how these cheaper engines came to exist in the first place, how these motors became so cheap and good enough. For most of the modern outboard era, the companies behind the badges were predictable. A handful of American and Japanese brands poured money into new platforms, cleaner combustion, and dealer networks that could keep fleets alive. They carried large engineering staffs, ran test boats in harsh water for years, and paid lawyers and regulators to certify that their engines met the rules. Along the coastlines of China, a different role was taking shape. Factories there began as quiet suppliers rather than headline names. They cast brackets and housings, machined shafts and gears, and assembled carburetors and harnesses that ended up hidden inside engines wearing more famous logos. Their work was important, but invisible to anyone walking a dock, as those factories gained experience with casting, machining, and assembly. Another possibility opened up. Instead of only building parts, some began building entire engines based closely on older, proven designs. An outboard architecture that a Japanese company had retired could be measured, modeled, and recreated with local tooling and materials. The core layout had already been proven to run. By leaning on those existing blueprints, these builders were able to skip much of what made the original engines so expensive to develop. They did not have to bankroll huge research and development programs. They did not have to maintain large global dealership structures. They could target markets where enforcement of emissions and certification rules was lighter or slower. China's dense industrial clusters made this approach even more effective. Within a short distance, a factory could source castings, electronics, plastics for cowlings, fasteners, and packaging. Turning a copied design into a shippable product became a fast and relatively low overhead process. The result was simple and powerful. They could put an engine on a crate that offered similar advertised horsepower and broadly familiar features for a price that the big brands simply could not match. To a buyer comparing lines on a spreadsheet, it looked like a way to escape paying for a lot of overhead that they never directly saw. That is how a flood of Chinese names ended up on transoms that once would have carried only American or Japanese badges. To understand why some of those owners stay happy and others quietly regret the decision, you have to follow the story past the quote sheet and into the break-in period, the honeymoon phase that sells a lot of motors. Scroll through boating forums or stand near any busy launch ramp, and you will hear a familiar kind of story. Someone has just mounted a brand new Chinese outboard on their skiff or pontoon. They are excited, they post pictures or wave friends over, and the first impressions are hard to argue with. The engine looks sharp, the decals are straight, the hardware is shiny, and the whole package feels more expensive than the price they paid. The first start is usually uneventful. Fuel line connected, primer bulb squeezed, firm, key turned. The motor fires and settles into an idle that sounds a lot like any other four-stroke in its class. A shift into gear, a push of the throttle, and the boat climbs onto plane. For that first day on the water, there is often a quiet sense of having beaten the system. There are reasons this first chapter goes smoothly so often. Many of these engines are built around simple, time-tested layouts. They use carburetors or basic injection systems, keep the number of sensors low, and run with far less computer oversight than the latest premium platforms. There is less software waiting to complain about edge case conditions. That simplicity can feel like toughness. A weak battery that might annoy a finicky modern engine often still spins a simpler motor to life. Slightly dirty fuel that would trigger warnings on a high-end system may just pass through and burn. The engine is less likely to refuse to run because some small parameter is not perfect. For an owner who runs mostly in clean, fresh water, keeps the boat on a trailer, and uses it on a handful of weekends each year, this can be all they ever see. The paint stays presentable, the engine starts when asked, and any small quirks are written off as part of boating. When someone at the dock asks what it cost, the answer draws a reaction, and the owner feels quietly validated. Those stories are real, and they spread fast. They convince people that the warnings are exaggerated or outdated. What they do not show is how the same engines behave when the hours add up. The water is not always kind, and the boat lives in a world rougher than an inland lake. That part of the story is written in slower, smaller ways, starting deep inside the castings. If you are listening to this and thinking, that sounds like my boat, or you have a story that went the opposite way, drop it in the comments. Tell me what you are running, how many hours are on it, and what actually failed or surprised you. I read those, and they shape what we dig into next. And if you want more deep dives like this, where we pull past the brochure and talk about what really happens in the yard and on the water, hit like so this reaches more boaters, and subscribe so you do not miss on videos like this what the metal is actually saying about your odds. Every outboard is, at heart, a collection of metals and tolerances trying to hold together through heat, vibration, and exposure. The difference between one that quietly does its job for years and one that fails early is not a matter of luck. It is the sum of decisions made in foundries and machine shops that most buyers will never see. In the large American plants, the story starts with alloy recipes for blocks and heads chosen with very specific goals: strength under repeated load, resistance to cracking around critical areas, and predictable behavior when heated and cooled thousands of times. Castings are sampled and cut, inspected for gas pockets and porosity that could become the starting points of cracks years later. After casting, parts move through machining centers where bores, journals, and mating surfaces are measured constantly. Tolerances are tight, and parts that do not make the cut are scrapped rather than pushed along. It is an expensive way to run a production line. In the long run, it changes the probabilities of how engines age. Head gaskets stay sealed longer, bearings run cooler, and threads hold torque through many cycles of service. In a lower-cost factory, the job is narrower. The castings need to meet shape and size requirements, and the finished engines need to run. Alloy specifications may be broader, and the level of inspection per batch can be lighter. Castings with more internal variation make it through. Machining tolerances can be set a little wider, gauges checked a little less frequently, and marginal pieces accepted because they still assemble and start. Engines built this way can and do run. Some last much longer than anyone expected. Others develop early problems. Mechanics who see a lot of them talk in terms of tendencies instead of absolutes. More stripped threads on certain mounting points, more hairline cracks on certain heads, more gear wear that shows up sooner under similar hours. For light use, these tendencies may stay hidden. For boats that see real miles, heavy loads, and rougher water, the weaknesses tend to show themselves sooner. They blend into another slow, steady force that does not care about horsepower ratings or catalog language, only about metal, coatings, and time. How salt quietly rewrites the price tag. Saltwater is slow and patient. It does not arrive all at once. It creeps into every compromise in metal and paint and fastener choice, and then it waits. The way an engine is protected against that matters more than almost any line on a brochure. Imagine two near-identical hulls sitting in the same brackish marina. One hangs an American-branded four-stroke in the mid-range. The other wears a low-cost Chinese engine with a matching horsepower sticker. Neither owner is perfect about rinsing. Both leave the boats in the water for long stretches because hauling is annoying and storage is not cheap. On the American engine, the underwater parts sit inside a system that was designed and tested as a whole. The raw aluminum housings went through specific treatments, primers were chosen to bond to those surfaces, and top coats were abused in test chambers and on workboats before anyone put them on production engines. Fasteners were picked from stainless blends that balance cost with real corrosion performance. Anodes were sized and placed to draw corrosion toward themselves instead of toward the rest of the gear case. On the Chinese motor, what you get depends heavily on who built it. Some have paid real attention to this side of the problem, others have not. In those cases, preparation can be rushed, primer thin, and paint more about looking good in a crate than surviving 10 years in a rough marina. Fasteners might be labeled stainless, but behave more like a compromise between cost and durability. A node size and placement might be copied by eye from an older design, rather than tuned. After several seasons, a diver or a yard worker can tell the difference before they even see the brand. The American gear case may look worn, but the paint often still lies flat, and the worst corrosion clusters near the anodes. The cheaper unit is more likely to show bubbling around edges, flaking near seams, and pitting close to seals and screw heads. Bolts resist turning or snap when someone finally leans on them with a wrench. Once corrosion reaches the narrow surfaces where seals are supposed to ride, water begins to slip past into the gear oil. At first, it just shows up as a hint of milkiness in the oil that drains into a pan. If service is rushed or skipped, that warning disappears down the waste drum without anyone really noticing. The gears and bearings are left to run in a mixture that slowly chews them apart. By the time the owner hears grinding or feels new vibration under load, the damage is usually expensive. On a high-end American engine, that cost hurts, but can still make sense because the rest of the motor holds value. On a budget Chinese outboard, the same bill can instantly turn a proud bargain into something disposable. What felt better and cheaper at the dock has quietly collected the rest of its price tag from under the waterline. What really happens when something breaks for real? Engines have a habit of picking the worst times to quit. A long-planned family trip, the first truly warm weekend of spring, the opening of a charter season. In that moment, what you paid on day one matters less than how long you will be sitting on shore, waiting for parts and answers. Picture two owners in that spot. Their engines, one American and one Chinese, have both refused to start. Basic checks have not solved it. Neither owner has the time or tools to strip the engine on their own. The American owner calls a dealer that has been working with that brand for years. The shop looks up the serial number, sees parts diagrams, service bulletins, and warranty status tied to that specific model. If it is a known problem, they may have seen it before. Parts can be ordered from regional warehouses, and shipping times are measured in days rather than months. The infrastructure supporting that process is invisible until a moment like this, and it was paid for in small pieces by every owner who chose that brand. The Chinese engine owner may be facing a different route. The seller might be an online importer with a warehouse and a help address, but no real local shop. They might be a small dealer who sells many brands and keeps limited stock of parts. Warranty claims can involve sending pictures and video clips across time zones, waiting for approvals, and discovering that the component needed is sitting in another country or still on a production schedule. While all of that unfolds, the boat does not move. For a casual weekend boater, the cost is frustration and a few lost days. For someone who runs small charters, guides anglers, or uses their boat to support another business, every lost weekend is a bill that never shows up on any statement. Trips are canceled, clients drift away, and the memory of the original savings begins to blur. This difference in support is not a moral issue. It is what happens when one business model spends heavily to build and maintain a dense service network, and the other keeps prices low by trimming everything that happens after the crate leaves the dock. Even if nothing ever fails in a dramatic way, there is another meter running quietly beneath all of this, ticking away with every hour on the water. fuel burn, maintenance, and the ledger. No one adds up all at once. Beyond breakdowns and corrosion, outboards drain money through fuel and routine service. Those costs rarely feel dramatic on any single day. Over years, they shape the real answer to whether an engine was truly cheaper or more expensive. Modern four-stroke outboards from the major American and Japanese brands are built under strict rules for emissions and efficiency. To meet them, manufacturers have invested heavily in careful fuel injection, ignition control, and electronic management. Sensors feed information to computers that constantly trim timing and mixture to keep combustion clean and efficient across a wide range of loads and temperatures. Designing and certifying these systems is expensive and ongoing. It nudges the sticker price upward, and sometimes forces owners into service bays with special tools and software. The quieter effect is that these engines often burn less fuel per hour than older or simpler designs. Over the course of a single weekend, that difference hardly registers. Spread over many seasons of regular use, especially for high-hour boats, it grows into a number that matters. Many Chinese outboards follow an older script. They lean on basic carburetors or simple, non-adaptive injection. They are less dependent on proprietary diagnostic tools and more approachable for owners who like to tinker. That can be a real advantage far from dealers. The trade is that these systems rarely match the efficiency of engines designed from the start to hit modern emissions curves. They tend to burn more fuel to do the same work. Maintenance tells a similar quiet story. A big brand American outboard comes with service schedules based on controlled testing and real fleets. Dealers carry the right filters, impellers, gaskets, and plugs. Aftermarket suppliers compete to offer parts that fit and last. A careful owner who follows those schedules and uses decent parts gives the engine its best chance of running well into high hours. For lower volume Chinese engines, high-quality parts can be harder to source. Some pieces interchange with older designs, which helps. Others are unique and available only through a thin network of vendors. Gaskets may fit loosely, rubber may age quickly, and owners may stretch intervals or substitute whatever is close enough. The engine will probably keep running, but its safety margin shrinks with every compromise. When you add purchase price, fuel, maintenance, and downtime together, the picture shifts. In some cases, the cheap engine stays ahead and delivers perfectly fair value. In others, especially when resale enters the equation, the engine that looked expensive on day one ends up costing less over the full life of the boat, where Chinese outboards actually make sense. If you only listened to professionals working in saltwater yards, you might think, what? Buying a Chinese outboard is always a mistake. But out on real lakes and quiet rivers, the story changes. There are places where the cheaper engine is not just acceptable, it is the logical choice. Picture a small, freshwater lake where the boating season lasts a few short months. The boats are modest, the water calm, and most hulls spend far more time on trailers than tied to docks. Owners may only log a handful of weekends each year, 20, maybe 30 hours of running time total. In that kind of use, a simple four-stroke, built from an older, proven design, can run for years without ever exposing its limits. The shortcuts in casting, coatings, and electronics never truly get tested because the water is gentle and the demands stay light. For families on tight budgets, the choice is sometimes between an affordable Chinese outboard and no boat at all. The high-priced American or Japanese engine might require debt they do not want, or savings they simply do not have. The cheaper option gets them on the water now, if they understand that resale value may be minimal and accept that a major failure could mean replacing instead of repairing. They may still come out ahead for the use they get. In remote or economically constrained regions, simple engines with minimal electronics can be easier to live with than sophisticated systems that demand specialized tools. A local machinist can rebush a worn pivot, rebuild a carburetor, or weld a cracked bracket, even if official parts are hard to find. Those repairs may not look like what a factory manual would recommend, but they keep boats moving where the alternative is sitting on shore. These use cases explain the genuinely positive stories that circulate about cheap, imported outboards. They are not illusions. They are examples of engines being used within the limits of their design and support. The trouble starts when those same engines are asked to do the work of higher-grade machines in harsher water. Why American outboards still own the hard places. Walk through a yard full of charter boats, commercial hulls, and serious offshore rigs, and the engine mix changes. The badges tilt heavily toward the major American and Japanese brands, even when the hulls themselves are scraped, faded, and obviously worked hard. The people who run these boats care less about how an engine looked on delivery day, and more about what it feels like at 1,000 hours. For guides who run multiple trips a day in salt and chop, for small commercial fishers who push heavily loaded hulls through tight weather windows, an outboard is not an accessory. It is the center of their income. In that world, design choices around alloys, machining, coatings, and fuel systems are not abstractions. They are the difference between finishing a season and watching it unravel. When something breaks on a big brand engine in this environment, the support network matters. Trained technicians, stocked parts rooms, and established warranty processes keep boats from losing entire seasons. Owners may grumble about the price of a part, but they also understand the cost of a week or a month on the hard. Resale sits quietly at the end of the story. A 10-year-old American outboard from a respected line with maintenance records and visible care still carries real value. Buyers recognize the badge and know roughly what to expect. The same hull with an unfamiliar imported engine on the transom often has to be discounted, sometimes heavily, because buyers assume they will be repowering soon. The savings that felt so compelling at purchase can vanish in a single line on a bill of sale. None of this means that one side is always right and the other always wrong. It means that better and cheaper only make sense when tied to how and where you actually run your boat, how many hours you truly expect to log, and how you feel about uncertainty bolted to the back of your hull. When you strip away marketing, flags, and forum arguments, every outboard still collects its full price sooner or later. Some charge more on the day you sign and try to pay you back in quieter ways. Fewer failures, better support, fuel that stretches a little farther, and an engine someone actually wants to buy from you later. Others give you a discount up front and ask for the balance later, through extra fuel, tricky repairs, creeping corrosion, or a hull that sits because buyers do not trust what is on the bracket. If you are not sure which side your own setup really falls on, ask in the comments. Tell me what you are running, where, and what you are worried about, and I will try to fold those into future chapters. And if you want more of these deep, non-brochure breakdowns, hit like so this reaches more boaters, and subscribe so you are there when we untangle the next set of quiet failures.